shortly up at kiwifm.co.nz if you missed it on the Radio Wammo show page link. Right now, though, I'm going to get myself together, collect my thoughts. Here we go. Let's talk about space. Stare into space, in fact, with Dylan Storey. Thanks very much to the Auckland Stardome Observatory. G'day there, Dylan.
G'day.
Joining us from Wellington City today. He's made his way out of the party zone. Congratulations. Well done.
Wellington's pretty party zone, though.
Yeah, no doubt. Let's talk about the big space story of the week was some new high-res photos of the moon have just been released that actually show that there were, in fact, astronauts at some point in time on the moon, Dylan.
Yeah, who would have thought, eh?
Yeah.
So NASA's released these pictures which are much higher res than ever before, so you can see it gets down to about 25 centimetres per pixel, so you can quite clearly see the astronauts' tracks, and they've actually mapped 3 of the landing sites, so Apollo 12, 14 and 17.
Yep.
And you can see on the ones on Apollo 17, you can see where the vehicle tracks went, and you can see where the astronauts' tracks went. And it's really cool to see the landing sites, and you can see some of the things left there. Like there's part of the lander, the part that stays there. You can see that.
Because the conspiracy theorists, would be saying, well, why is this taking so long for these photos to come out? Why, we've had decades. Why haven't they been able to do this previously?
Well, so the lacrosse. The Lunar Reconnaissance Orbiter, or LRO, has been up mapping the moon for a few years now. And it started off at an altitude of 100 kilometres taking pictures of the moon. It went down to 50, which is its standard orbit, and its job is to take lots of pictures of the moon and to sort of map the moon so we can learn about the moon from a scientific perspective, map all the geology and that. So it's mainly a scientific mission. Taking photos of the landing sites is nice and it's fun, but it's not a priority for this expensive mission, which is to do proper science. The science in these areas was done by the people on the ground. Yeah. So it's kind of been like a nice bonus. And what they just to go back and talk about some people who follow the conspiracy theories on moon landing, whatever. I've had a few conversations in the Stardome with people like, why can't you see it through a telescope?
Yeah.
Well, there's this photo in there. It's kind of a famous photo of the International Space Station above Christchurch.
Yeah.
And you can see the astronaut out there in space on the side of the thing, and you can see the Banks Peninsula below and stuff.
That's a cool photo. Yeah.
And it's a great photo. So that's from about 300 kilometres up. And you look at that photo and you can see Christchurch has a kind of a grey blur on the photo. And so you say, this is from 300 kilometres up. Can you see a flag in somebody's backyard?
Yeah, true.
No, you can't even make out... You can barely make out Christchurch itself, so it gives some perspective. The moon is 380,000 kilometres away. So there's no way a terrestrial telescope, no matter how powerful, could see anything with anywhere near that detail. So we rely on these things, on these spacecrafts orbiting the Earth. So the Lunar Reconnaissance Observatory has been going around, and recently they decided to go in and get some closer photos. Now, to do this, they had to go onto an elliptical orbit, so they have to change the orbit with the booster, so it goes out at some points and comes in closer at some points. And so that means that where it dips in would be over the landing site, so it can get a really good photo. And it goes as close as about 21 kilometres.
That's pretty close, right?
And that's really close, yeah. That's kind of skimming the surface of the moon. Of course, the moon doesn't have anywhere near the gravity of Earth, so 21 kilometres from Earth and you'd be crashed and burned. But the moon you can skim a lot easier. So when it sort of dives past these areas, it takes these high-res photos. And the reason it can't do that all the time is because if it was orbiting at that altitude, even with the moon's lower gravity, it would the orbit would degrade and it would crash. So they can only just sort of skim it, and it takes a lot of fuel because it needs to burn the fuel to get in and out of this elliptical orbit. So it wouldn't be sustainable for very long. So it's just kind of like a nice little fun thing to do, burn up a bit of fuel and take some close photos of these landing sites.
And these landing sites are basically frozen in time, aren't they?
Yeah, well, they are, yeah. And they're really cool. Listeners can, of course, just if you just Google them, they're on the NASA website. There's a great one of the Apollo 12 landing site, and that's Apollo 12 is known for its precision landing. So Apollo 11, the first one, went a bit off. There was a few problems on descent, and they ended up landing somewhere else. Apollo 12 landed exactly where they'd planned it. So they landed near the Surveyor 3 spacecraft, which was a remote control spacecraft, already landed there. And you can see where it landed. You can see the astronauts' tracks walking. They didn't walk through the crater, they walked around it. They got up to Surveyor 3, had a good look at it. And then they walked around the crater some more, and they walked off to another crater. And you can see where they split up, and one of them went back around the other way, back to the lander, and the other one went back.
And they, of course, they would have had to have left a lot of stuff up there as well, a lot of junk. Did they leave any poos, though, Dylan?
I don't know the answer to that. No, I mean...
Why bring back poos with you?
Well, I don't know. For the sake of ejecting it for the weight, I guess it's not really worth it. I mean, they would be contained in their spacesuit if they didn't need poos out on the moon. And I don't know if it would really be a priority for the pressure drop to chuck them outside. I suspect they brought them back. I have to do some research on that, Wammo.
Yeah, of course. Because the lunar lander, they would have had to have had the spacesuits on inside the lander, right? It wasn't like it wasn't like the International Space Station where you could happily wander around in your jocks.
No, I think it was a pressurized environment, so they didn't need their suits to survive in there, but they certainly needed to put them on in there before they went into the airlock and went out.
Yeah.
I imagine it's quite a process getting in and out of the airlock,
But
so you probably wouldn't do.
Don't they, like with those little spacecraft? Don't they have waste ejectors? That kind of like aircraft toilets.
Well, things like the International Space Station recycle all their waste, so you can't just eject perfectly good organic matter, even if it is poos. It's recycled and.
Again, the reason why I asked that question is because wherever humans go, we just tend to spoil the environment, don't we?
Yeah, we can't mess it up. Yeah.
So that was my point there, I suppose, and it's something that we've got to think about. If we are going to be venturing and jumping onto new planets or whatnot, if we're going to do that to Mars or something, we've got to figure out what to do with the poos when we get there.
Yeah, I mean, there's also probably many tons of sort of spent rocket fuel and bad chemicals and things that are left there, which are probably a little bit more dangerous than the poos. But I remember a few weeks ago we were talking about the craft that's gone to the asteroids, gone to Ceres.
Yeah.
Well, I did read somewhere that one of the reasons they couldn't land on the asteroid or send any projectiles down to it was because they didn't want to contaminate it. And contaminate it with human bacteria, which would inevitably be on the spacecraft. Now, I'm not actually sure. I don't actually understand the mechanisms of that. How could it contaminate? What could it contaminate? But the fact that scientists are thinking about this, the effect that human technology is having being spread around the solar system.
Well, there's a risk that we could be sharing that meteor with another alien species, and so if we contaminated the bacteria on, put the bacteria on that, and then another alien picked it up, it could be trouble.
And they could get the flu.
Yeah.
I'm not sure. I mean, it's obviously possible. Anything like that is possible, but I don't think it's very likely.
Look, all I know is the last thing you want to do is share asteroids.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it's probably a big faux pas in space, in space exploration amongst species circles.
Hey, on that note, Dylan, we do have to just quickly mention before we go That it would be great if we talk about the southern night sky at the Auckland Stardome Observatory. Be particularly interesting for overseas guests, and there are a lot of overseas guests for the biggest party this country has ever seen, the biggest day in our history. Anyway, the Southern Cross. People can come down and look at the Southern Cross because you can't really see that in the Northern Hemisphere. That's why it's called the Southern Cross. Matariki, of course, it's Scorpius. Astronomy presenters will talk about why these stars are so special and how to find them in the night sky. It's all happening at the Stardome Observatory, stardome.org.nz. There you go. There's the bit.
Yeah. You've pretty much summed it all up there.
Yeah.
Apparently, there's a lot of overseas visitors in Auckland at the moment for something.
Yeah.
And
that's what I said. Yeah.
And if they want, they can learn about the southern sky and see the Southern Cross. Yeah, and as its name suggests, it's in the southern part of the sky.
Yeah,
and
that's what I said. Yeah.
And so it's an astronomy show focusing on the night sky. And it will even talk about things that you can see from all around the world but have some special significance in New Zealand, like the Matariki cluster.
Yeah.
And, of course, a lot of local anecdotes and stories about the stars.
Yeah. The alternative party is happening down at the Auckland Stardome Observatory if you're not going to the cloud. Thanks very much, Dylan.
Where the party's at.
That's where the party's at. Dylan Storey in Wellington. We'll see you next week.